not feeling comfortable about your upcoming math course, use TI-Nspire's Guide to Algebra Fundamentals along with TI-Nspire CAS calculator to help you get and have confidence in your ability to do math. Let's take a look at some of the places where this can be very useful. What happens in the guide is it gives us the rules for manually manipulating the problem out. Then it shows us the manual manipulation, and then it shows us doing it with our calculator. In this overview, we will take a look at several of the areas where this calculator can provide assistance and help you when you hit an area that is somewhat confusing until you get a chance to master it. So one of the areas is the order of operations. And as we can see, the steps are shown out here, and we see that the calculator comes up with the same answer. Let's move ahead to another area. When we look at how the real numbers are organized, again, we can put these numbers into our calculator to see what the decimal equivalents are. Now there's two versions of the calculator. The one is the computer algebra system, and the other one is the numerical version. We recommend the computer algebra system because it can help us a lot more with the theoretical material. In fact, when we're looking at these kind of problems on our calculator, if we go to our scratchpad area, it's already went to a power mode, put in 1. The CAS model of the calculator will give it back as the number E. If we want to see what it is as a decimal, we will press Control and Enter. The same thing is true for these other irrational numbers. So if we type in pi and press Enter, we will see pi. If we type in the square root, notice it's in blue, so if we hit Control and put in 2 and press Enter, it will show it as the square root of 2. We like the CAS model a lot better than the numerical model because of this ability to display things exactly instead of with approximations. Okay, let's move ahead a couple pages. So the next area that the guide gives us is switching a repeating decimal into a fraction. This is a quite complex problem, and again, the guide spells it out for us. Basically, what happens here is we use the calculator as a calculator to do the manipulation. So if I go over to the next page, we see the calculator worked out. To see this over here in our file system that the calculator has, we go back to our home screen. We go back to the current file. And this is in the third tab, so it has to do with example 3. So if we hit Control and the right arrow, we see this screen in our calculator that we have shown on our guide. We have moved ahead several pages. The definition of absolute value is that the absolute value is equal to what's inside here if the number is greater than or equal to 0. And if the number is a negative number, it's equal to the opposite of a negative number, which is a positive number. So this is a little confusing because when you look at the negative sign, you think that it's a positive. Again, the calculator can help us with this by allowing us to put this into the calculator to see what's going on. Again, to show you how this works, I'll move over back to the scratch pad. On the scratch pad, to clear it out, we go to Menu, we go to Actions, which is 1. we go to clear the history out, which is option number 5. Then to put in expressions, we will use the template. The template is already on absolute value, so we'll press enter. Then we'll put in A. We need to move outside of our absolute value, so we'll move over. This is the with operator, which is located above the equal operator, so we'll hit Control equal. We'll move over to with, press enter to add it, then add a greater than or equal to, that again, that'll be in the equal area. So we'll hit Control equal, move down to greater than or equal, press enter, press 0, press enter, says A. The calculator is really nice because we can use the arrows to go up and copy and then edit stuff. So we use the arrow to move up to this, then we will press enter, which will copy it down. We want to work with A less than 0, so we'll go inside here. We'll hit the delete key. To get the less than, we'll go to the same area, move over to the less than, press enter, and we see that the answer comes out to be negative A. So again, that's a very nice part of this calculator, is if we forget formal definitions, we can use it to help us with them. Another nice feature of this calculator is any formula that's not in the calculator, we can add the formula to the calculator. So taking a quick overview of this, if we go over to here, we see us adding a formula to the calculator. Then we call up the formula that we added to our calculator. We put in the parameters and it gives us the answer. So as we go through this course, there are many formulas that you will use in algebra courses. So one of them has to do with arithmetic sequences. To find the nth term, this is the formula. To find the arithmetic sum, there's 2 different ways to do it. So we entered both of those into our calculator. And then we do the routines to store these. Then once they're stored, we can call them back up, plug in values, or plug in the parameters to see what the initial formulas were. Again, this about plugging in parameters that are variables only works in the CAS calculator. Moving on to Chapter 2, the TI-Nspire has different activities provided by Texas Instruments. This is an activity where they show you vectors that relate to positive and negative numbers and how you will hit the heads and tails together to come up with the results when you add. Then they'll have the same activity where you will take the opposite of the vector and then add it for when you subtract. Then we come up with the rules for adding and subtraction and other different rules. In this second chapter, what you will want to do is learn how to do these rules directly. You can put them into your calculator, but it's much more efficient to learn the rules, and that's what we teach you for addition and subtraction. And as you go through this second chapter, we will go over the various properties in math and how the properties apply to the calculator, then teach you the rules for multiplication, and go over and take a look at the rules for division and handling 0 with division. A lot of times students struggle with doing fractions, so the calculator will work fractions directly and fractional expressions. So it shows you about equivalent fractions, and we go over some lessons that have to do with that. We go over about dividing, and dividing is a little trickier because it depends on the order and the precedence that you put them in. The best thing to do is to use the pretty input to do our fractions. So if we want to take 3/5 times 7/2, for example, we can go Control and bring up our fraction template, put in 3, go down, put in 5, move over, tell it times, call up our fraction template again, put in 7, go down, put in 2, press enter, and see that the answer is 21/10. Let's take a quick look at division of this same kind of problem. So let's take a look at the fraction template of 3/5. So we'll go down here, 3/5. We'll go over and we'll actually use the divide. We'll hit the fraction template here. We'll put in 7/2 and we'll press enter. Notice we end up with the 6/35, just like we did here on our screen, but notice that it switches it over to a complex or compound fraction. So again, this is very handy to use for manipulating fractions and fractional expressions. Now again, the advantage of the CAS model is it lets us work out ones with variables in it. In fact, the calculator is not sure whether to leave the answer as terms or whether to switch the answer over to this form. So there is a built-in common denominator command to switch it from terms over to the more traditional form that we're used to. So again, this is real handy. In fact, to take a look at where these commands are, you can go to menu, you can go to algebra or number. Okay, so let's say we go to number, okay, in there, and let's clear out because I accidentally hit something I didn't mean to hit. So let's go to menu, let's go to number, let's go to our fraction tools, and you will see there is your common denominator. So this is how you bring up the command to do common denominators. So again, if I plug in a over b plus c over d, it will give me this answer. Then besides working out fractions, we have to handle negatives, and we can use our calculator to help us see that a -1 times a is the same as a -a, that a negative on the first term or a negative on the second term is equivalent to each other, which is written as true, that 2 negatives are equivalent to having no negatives, or a negative in the front of an expression that's added with terms is the same as -1 times that, or we can work these problems direct. We prefer to work problems like this with a -1. What this will let us do is to work with nested parentheses and to work with collect-alike terms. So again, as we go through material, we will use our calculator to help us take a look at these kinds of pieces of information. I just loaded into my calculator the examples for the second chapter from volume 1 of the tutorial. You see this is example 3. So if I hit control and this arrow, I'm up to 2. If I hit control and the arrow again, I'm up to example 3. So you can see that the calculator and working this stuff manually gives us the same answer. And if I flip to the next or ahead a couple pages, you also see this written out in our tutorial. Again, the tutorial, after we work problems out, gives us the ability to work more problems to make sure that we understand the examples. So that's another feature of the tutorial. In the next chapter of our tutorial, we deal with positive and negative exponents. So again, we have all kinds of rules for dealing with positive and negative exponents, so we can experiment in our scratchpad area to come up with the different rules that we're going to be going over. We can also then use this to work some quite complex problems. So again, if you would struggle with working these out manually, you can use your calculator to help ensure that you get these correct. Here again, you see that we have the various rules for dealing with exponents. And if we take a look at our example problem for the third chapter, we see that we have all kinds of problems to work. These are shown as example 2. I've now loaded our calculator with the problems from chapter 3 of volume 1. So if I want to move to the next tab, and then if I want to scroll up and down, I can see all these various problems worked out on my calculator. Again, the guide will show you the same thing that you see over here on your calculator. The next thing that happens in chapter 3 is we start working with some very large and very small numbers. So we go over how to handle scientific notation. Now, again, the advantage to the CAS calculator, it also allows us to include the units of measurement and convert from one measurement to another unit of measurement. So this is a really nice feature. Then the calculator stores answers, okay, numerically. So the 1 over the square root of 3 and 3 over the square root of 3 are mathematically equivalent, but how they're stored in the calculator, one has a 2 and one has a 3. So when we use a CAS calculator and compare the two, it says that the two are true. But when we press Control and enter, which is the approximation, it says that they're not true. So again, the guide gives you some nuances that you normally wouldn't get trying to figure this stuff out on your own. Another thing that happens is when we start working problems out, if we put things in as fractions instead of decimals, we get infinite almost types of digits for our answer. The calculator has various modes that it uses to keep track of things. So it says 1 and 7, 2 and 1, 3 and 1, 4 and 1, 5 and 1, 6 and 1, 7 and 1. These are telling us the modes that are in our calculator. And we can convert things over to scientific and decimal by using notation like this. Now, what happens is when you want to work things out with scientific notation, you only get to keep the number of digits in the least amount of figures that you are multiplying or dividing or raising to powers. So this is a little program to help you do that. So when you're working calculators out, you can store intermediate results in a variable like kilometers. Now, again, with 2 letters, this is actually just one variable. We used a longer name. Then I called up the scientific notation program that we wrote, and then the advantage to doing this is it doesn't keep all the extra digits when you're doing the calculation. And to show what happens if you weren't using this program, you see all these extra digits and you would have to get rid of these digits yourself instead of letting the program do this for you. The next chapter is on radicals and rational exponents. Here we learn how to use the solve command. The numeric one only has the end solve command. Again, this is far superior to this end solve command. When you start dealing with radicals, you have to handle positive and negative and dealing with real numbers. You also get this expanded to, besides square roots, to other indexes. Our calculator can help us somewhat with the manipulation of radicals. This is one area where the calculator is sometimes not as useful as other ones. So again, we go over the nuances in this chapter of where the calculator works well and where it doesn't. Again, we go over some rules to help you simplify radicals. So what there is there's the formal way to do it, and then there's this informal way to use this to simplify. So again, we point out things like this in our lesson. We also show you in the tutorial how to use other applications in the calculator. So when you're trying to manually figure out how to simplify radicals, it's nice to have some tables of values. And so again, we show you how to use some of those applications. As we said, doing things with radicals can get kind of complex. So here we work out problems manually. Here we do them on the calculator. So again, you can see where the calculator can be used and where it can't be used with radicals. Chapter 5 is algebraic expressions. So we will use the calculator to add and subtract algebraic expressions. Again, the CAS model can do this. The numerical model cannot. When we have to multiply stuff out using the FOIL technique, we have to use the expand command to multiply stuff out. Here we were showing how the FOIL technique works. Basically, all we'd have to do is use this entry right here. Here we show you examples of using the expand command to do the traditional FOIL working out of problems. When you start manipulating, you have special product formulas. Again, if we needed some assistance with these, we could actually use the expand command to create the formulas over here for us to take a look at them. The 6th chapter is on factoring, and factoring is used to reduce rational expressions and to solve higher powered polynomials in there. So we can put factoring commands in here. Although again, on the calculator, we can just do these directly. This shows us where our factoring will work with integer coefficients, will work with fractional coefficients, but it does not work for the answers that turn out to be irrational numbers. It will multiply them out, but again, it will not factor this to this kind of answer unless we switch some formats in our calculator. We go over some rules for finding common factors. We go over a technique for factoring trinomials. Again, the calculator can work these problems out direct, and the CAS can do it. but the, again, numerical one will not do this. So you will have to use this technique if you're using the numerical version of the calculator. Again, here we're following those rules, and here we're using the calculator to work the problem. The calculator will also handle fractional exponents as we work out the problem manually using, fractional exponents, and come up with the same kind of answer. Although this is what happens to you in calculus classes. Things start getting very messy when you start doing this. And the same thing shows up with our calculator. Again, the special factoring formulas can be getting by just using the factoring command. The last chapter is on rational expressions. So we go over how to simplify rational expressions. We go over how to multiply and divide rational expressions, doing the same things on our calculator. Then we go over how to add and subtract, which exactly parallels what we do with fractions. So we show that out for you. And again, this can get quite complex, but the calculator is very good at helping us with this. Then when we move into compound fractions, the main use for this kind of stuff is in your calculus classes that follow these kind of algebra classes. So again, we go over some exposure to that. We also show you how you can build libraries of functions that can help us solve complex problems. The main uses for stuff like this will be in like a calculus class. Again, we show you how these libraries work and how we can apply them to help us solve problems. We end our tutorial with an apartment complex revenue solution. We show how you can use arithmetic, algebra, and calculus to solve the problem. Again, the calculator and this guide can really help you with your ability to have confidence and perform math operations.